Thank you very much. Many of you know Rourke Miller. Rourke has been a member here since 2008. Moved here in the Traverse City area, I think, 2006, I believe. You moved up here from Chicago.
Yes.
Worked at the Great Lakes Sailing Company for a while. But Rourke's been... Oh, he still does, all
Sure,
right.
when they call you, answer.
Oh, yeah, whatever. He's been a professional captain for over 20 years. Got his 100-ton master's U.S. Coast Guard license. In fact, I looked at his website. He's got U.S. Coast Guard approved instructor and examiner, ASA instructor, U.S. sailing instructor, and even a kiteboarding instructor. So pretty impressive. But we wanted to bring him in tonight because in November of last year, he took off from Cape Town, South Africa on a 50-foot catamaran and brought it up here into the Great Lakes. And we thought, well, we can't get a better, cruising program than that. So he's here tonight. He and Merrill are here tonight to talk about the highlights, share some stories, got some great pictures. And with that, I'll just turn this over to Rourke.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for all the great food. Appreciate it. This is Meryl, my partner, and she's been a key part of this. Come on, you got to stand up. No, this boat is too big to sail solo, so two, it's just right. Always looking for volunteers, though. Yeah, about a year and a half ago, we decided to pull the trigger on a different teaching platform where I could do higher end instruction on what people were most into. So that drew us to catamarans. I think they're pretty cool, but I've also liked wooden tall ships in the past, as Doug knows and Brian knows, and some people here know. But the kiteboarding and foil boarding is pretty cool. But I think cats are where it's at for what people are most interested in. This will show the boat that we went and picked up. It was about 3/4 of the way built, and maybe they didn't have that much money to go finish it. So I called them up and struck a deal with Duncan Lethbridge, who's ran this company for 35 years. And he was like, hey, if you want the boat, fund the rest of it and make this happen. And so it took about 2 months of me living there on and off to oversee the finalization of the construction, which I was not swinging a hammer and showing up with a bag of nails. I knew the least amount out of everybody in this whole shop. That guy's a great woodworker. He also is pretty keen with a BB gun because he has to shoot the birds before they have droppings on his finished work. Yeah, I mean, they build them by hand down there in South Africa. I met Eric and Annette earlier from South Africa, and it's such a cool country. It's so sweet, and they're such craftsmen. They take so much pride in all of their work. And it takes time. They can only build 2 of these boats a year. It was pretty state-of-the-art when it came out in 2008, and now they're just kind of refining it from hull after hull.
Where in Cape Town was it, sorry?
This is actually in St. Francis Bay.
Oh, okay.
So it's Port Elizabeth would be the closest main city to it. In fact, they don't even build the boat very close to the water, so they have to shut down the town and say, everybody clear out. And some of those people are enjoying the parade of it all, and others just inconveniently got stuck behind that boat for about a half hour. But it's okay, everyone was all smiles. It's a very big deal in the town because there are 30 craftsmen who have families that build this boat. So the manufacturer is a major employer in this small town. And it was everyone kind of showed up to see the thing get launched. This is a really cool private marina. It's the only non-government-owned marina, and it's owned by the Chaka squid.
Calamari.
Oh, calamari. Well, anyhow. You go out and get all this calamari. It smells like calamari. I can smell it still, watching this video. This was the nice toast that went about. And this was Duncan Lethbridge's last ship that he launched before he passed away. So that was a pretty big deal. He was a cool guy. And that's the men and women who showed up for the photo. There were a few others that didn't come. And there she sat. And then it was time for me to come all the way back down to Traverse City, tie up some affairs, and assemble the crew to go and wait for the weather window to go pick it up. Nice. We headed on down, the four of us, my good friend Jeff Rudolph, who some people here know, Meryl, and my brother Joe. And we had a couple of stops to make along the way. Cape Point, really cool one, sure was. An old jagged coastline. They say waves have little mercy and rocks have none. It's really evident there. I was super excited to take everybody on this drive that I had done previously, alone on one of my trips. I didn't take into consideration that you can easily get car sick if you're not at the helm. So I didn't do anybody any favors taking them on this road, and there were plenty of them like that in South Africa. Those are the Nizna heads, and there's another rock that's just as big on the left, or on the starboard side of that sailboat. It's a field goal that you do not want to miss. Yeah, those are the rocks on the other side. I met some very cool people along the way and dropped off some GTYC Burgies. Unfortunately, I didn't pick up as many as I dropped off, but those are the breaks. We have some very cool ones out there in the world. In the middle of the South Atlantic in St. Helena, there's one, and all over the place. When I was getting homesick, I saw another naughty cat. That made me feel pretty good.
It's a universal tacky boat name.
Oh, I suppose I got out of order here because those were some photos from my first trip on down. This was the shot. Oh. Those are all the chaka boats that come on in to avoid some storms from time to time. I think they have like 90% of the world's calamari is coming out of there, of one particular species. It's really an outrageous amount. And it's supposed to be excellent, so excellent that they don't even sell it locally because they get so much more money from selling it elsewhere. There's the crew, me and Meryl and my brother Joe, the windmill miller, and Jeff with a ton of stuff. Maybe only 1,500 pounds, but close to it. And that is the stern of Wanda Rose.
Cool, it's got Traverse City's and Port of Call. Thank you for that.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Of course, yeah, with a little period at the end and then a period at the end of the state. I couldn't tell them to take it off. They said, no, this is how we do it. Okay, all right. South Africans are kind of like that. They know how to do things, even if you tell them it's not how it's done.
Can you pass that on? Yep.
Here's a pic of us at the moment when we're rounding Cape Agulhas. I always thought that Cape of Good Hope was the cape to cross there, but evidently the southernmost point is a different one called Cape Agulhas.
Where the radar is.
We had nice weather occasionally and we took photos then, but it wasn't always like that. When Meryl and I took off, the boat was leaving the harbor for the first time and it was blowing 35 knots. I said, this is how you guys do shakedown sails here? I said, well, you know, we've been at it for 30 years. And that was their explanation for it. And I was a little bit nervous that they were, you know, they were kind of sending me out there for a baptism of fire and too much. But the boat held up. And I threw up for the first time in my entire career. And my last time in my entire career. I've never gotten seasick. But as soon as I gave the helm up after about 8 hours after leaving the harbor, when I said, you know, I don't think anyone else can handle it as well as I can, but I can't do this any longer. I handed it over, I went off to the side and threw up and said, man, this boat's just gliding along great. This is wonderful. Someone hit auto helm. So, did a much better job.
Were you under sail?
Yeah, we were under sail. We hit 22.9 knots, coming down pretty much 18-foot waves, I think. Which, 18-foot waves, I've seen a lot of things that are 18-foot tall. 18-foot waves are a lot taller than 18-foot. It gets awfully quiet in between those waves. It's really raging. But you know, they sent their shop manager with us and an electrician, so they were willing to lose a couple staff if the boat didn't come out. I felt good there. This is us coming into Cape Town, and in my dreams, it was not night out, but whatever. We got there at night and took the photo. There's Meryl with Table Mountain, which was an incredible view. It was awesome.
What was the date of that shakedown? When did you take off? What date? Roughly.
October 14th or so?
14th.
Yeah, October 14th, 15th, 16th, something in there. We had to make it to the Cape Town Boat Show. We were one of the featured boats there.
What was the temperature?
The temperature was not that bad. In my previous visits, I was looking at my breath when I was laying in the bedroom that they had set me up in one of these kind of resorts that's, wow, you can get a really good deal at this time of year. Well, it's because they don't have heat for these things. And, you know, it was winter, but it was coming into spring here, Greg.
And how long was that first shakedown cruise to Cape Town?
It was about 3 days, 2.5 days, 3 days.
That's a shakedown.
Yeah, and it was just all sorts of fast. In fact, we had to put 50 hours on the engines so that Volvo could test them prior to us leaving the country. And so we were running our engines at 1900 RPM or something like that, and they were slowing us down significantly. So if I could have turned them off and then feathered the props, I think we probably would have gone about 24, because they say it's like half a knot. Yeah, the pitch was slowing us down.
So in 35 knots breeze with 18-foot waves, Reef, Maine, no Jenny, going down one? What?
Genoa. Genoa with just a couple of turns on the Genoa. Yeah, well, because the wind was from behind us. On a catamaran, you don't put the main up at all. It's not useful if the wind is more than 120 degrees behind you. The boat is so efficient that we could just go off of our head sails.
At 20, you were 22 knot speed?
Well, that was down to wave, 22.9. But we can steadily go about 14 or 15 with no waves, no currents. So that's really tearing through the water. Lion's Head. And this was the crew on a much nicer day at Cape Point. Oh, this was a really cool moment. Rob Brennan was, you know, I had a lot of help along the way from people at the yacht club here. I'm very thankful. And Mark Nugent set me up with a surveyor named Rob Brennan, who flew in from Cape Town and met me when I was thinking about buying the boat, because I was going to fly Mark out. I said, Mark, you know more about these boats than most people. Let's go check it out. But he was too busy. And so he referred me to this fellow. And Rob is now the chief operating officer at St. Francis. And but at the time, he was just coming to check out the boat. Anyway, we're quite good friends. He's a really cool guy. He ran Robertson and Kane, which most of you know is the boat that makes, or the company that makes Leopards and the moorings catamarans. And when Rob started there, they made 9 boats in their first year, and then in his last month at the company before he retired, they made 6. So that's quite a ramp up. Anyway, he gave us his 1982 Royal Cape Town Burgee, and I was super pumped to bring it. It's in Annapolis on the boat, I forgot it, sorry. But anyway, he's pretty pumped with the GTYC Burgee that is now in the Royal Cape Town Yacht Club. Pretty cool. The farmer's market is a real score in Cape Town. You can load up on some super healthy food very inexpensively for the voyage. And we ran out of our last biltong, which Annette and Eric, You know Biltong quite well, I'm sure.
And crew of horse.
Yeah, it's the beef jerky of South Africa. But I had some USA beef jerky. I thought it was terrible. And I think we ate the last of our Biltong, I don't know, Florida.
Yeah.
We had the last of our South African food when we were in the Great Lakes, though. Here's the nav desk on board. Look how small it is now. No room for charts, and just an iPad kind of does it all. Ooh, this was a cool spot. So when we left Cape Town, we were going to go to a country that I always mispronounce, Namibia? Namibia. What is it? Namibia. Anyhow, we wanted to go there, but the weather said no, get going to St. Helena. So we went to St. Helena. Is anyone familiar with St. Helena? It's pretty cool. It's where they banished Napoleon to after they had already banished him to another island, and he somehow got off of that. So they said, forget it, we're going to put you in the middle of the South Atlantic on this place. Holy cow. That background that you see is pretty much the most easy shoreline to get onto the island. It is unbelievable. They have this dock that's cut out, and you can't use your own dinghy there. You have to tie up onto the huge yellow moorings like you see there, and then they'll pick you on up and bring you on over to the dock where you can get on. And there are 4 ropes with a bunch of knots on them, and they don't care if you're a little kid or if you're a senior citizen. You are grabbing onto one of these ropes, and then they'll kind of push you along, and then whomever is on land will grab your clothes and kind of take you the rest of the way. It's a phenomenal island. I think that's a population of about 4,000 people. And it's like a totally different race that I'm not familiar with, because it was so long ago that a very finite amount of people had lived there, and they were all from different backgrounds, and they blended, and well, they're all cousins. Even under the same roof. And they said, oh, you want to go see Napoleon's houses? Yeah, houses. This guy gets banished there, okay, and he's, caused a lot of problems, and yet he had a farmhouse, a mansion, a house in the city, and an apartment, and all this stuff. And I was like, no thanks, I don't really want to see that, but I would like to see some of the plants and animals, if possible, that are unique to the island. And there were so many. It was really cool. It's kind of like Galapagos, only not as sweet, and much harder to get to. There's only 1 flight a week to get in there. That's the mooring field. And you can see down there is the little dock that I was mentioning.
It looks really exposed.
Oh man, you have no idea. When the weather's coming in on the mooring side there, it's illegal to keep your boat there, so you have to get on the boat and escape the weather. Only one place to go, the other side of the island. And so everyone just kind of moves around the island to stay in the lee of it as best as they can. And we have a GTYC Burgee there. Joe Miller hung it on up, and it's next to some pretty famous ones. It was cool to read the guest book there. There's some really recognizable names there. Then we cruised on off, and so I think it was 12 days to St. Helena. And then it was 13 days to get to the next stop, which was in Brazil. And this is called Fernando de la Noronha. And I had this South African skipper come on board, and well, he was supposed to get off in Grenada, and I wanted him to get off early, and so we took a left. And he threw plastic in the water. I just couldn't stand it, and I was like, we don't do that. And he's like, oh, I won't do it again, I won't do it again. And when faced with the task of rinsing off his plastic and throwing it away, and throwing it in the ocean, he just stood there and stared at it. I watched him from the helm, and he just stood there and stared at it, and he said, forget it. And he just took it, and he looked me in the eyes, and he chucked it into the ocean. And so I just went tick, 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 4 degrees to port, next stop, Brazil. And when we got to Brazil, I was like, hey, we're here, we're in Brazil. Let's make the most of it, okay? And so we got there, and then I said, okay, yeah, do you have visas? I'm like, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, all that stuff. What else? And evidently, You just can't go anywhere on a trip. So they said, no, you have to leave immediately. And so I don't know what we made up, but it was some kind of boat problem. And the guy said, okay, you have 72 hours to resolve your boat issue, but you cannot go on land any further than this point. Well, we went a little tiny bit further on this point because there was a restaurant just that little bit tiny further. And I was like, you know, we're going to sneak out for one nice meal here in Brazil. It'll be great. Oh my gosh, I should have kept sailing. Holy cow, $500 to go have a nice meal in Brazil. But nonetheless, at least we didn't have to pay the fees for if we were legally allowed to stay there, because I think it's $300 a day for the boat, $125 per crew daily to be at Fernando de la Noronha. Pretty spectacular place, though. It looks like King Kong's going to come out from behind that island. Mustache contest. I think I won, but some people think I came in a distant third. Does anyone know the Delos crew?
Yes.
Well, I kind of do now, too. We met them. It was awesome. And I was so bummed. My brother is obsessed with these guys. He thinks they're so cool. And Meryl and I came on into a mooring not long after Joe left. So we went to Grenada, then we went to St. Lucia, hit a few other places. And then this was in a really cool island called Ile de Sant. Has anyone ever heard of that place? By Guadeloupe. It is spectacular. Very, very cool. Because it's really French in heritage. There was no farming there. There were no fields. So there was really just French fishermen, not so much the field hands and other cultures that came on in there. But it's just unique. And lo and behold, right next to us was Delos. They asked us to party, but Meryl and I had a date night, so we missed it. But they're cool. Okay, some storms pop up. That's what happens to your shackle sometimes when a squall hits you and you're on a 50-foot cat. Because these cats can't heel on over. The monohulls, if you get hit by a big old blast, you know, they naturally go on over and you ditch a lot of that power. Well, it gets absorbed into the 316 grade stainless steel on a catamaran. $45. But then we got to, where is this? Turks and Caicos. And the wind stopped. And this was the first time that the wind had stopped in our whole trip. And it was a real perfect timing, actually. It was like this for about 40 miles. The boat has 232 gallons of diesel, and I was carrying a bunch of extras, so it wasn't a big deal. You can motor for probably about 1,600 miles off of just the tanks. And then my daughter came and visited Adelaide, who took her first steps in this yacht club right by the bar over there. Everyone was cheering her on. Jed, I know you remember that. And the cousins came on by. So things got a lot more fun and a lot less work. That was pretty cool. It's really nice being in the catamaran because you can get into some of the shallower anchorages. That's the best that engine ever looked right there. I bought it in South Africa, probably for $15, and I overpaid. It was really good at spilling gasoline in the lazarette. And the dinghy it was on was called the Turbo Sausage. It's in a dumpster. Hey, does anybody recognize this pole? This would be between the Bahamas and Florida. It's like there's no other hazard out there at all except for this marker right here, which is to mark a shoal, which is like 17 feet deep. So you would never have to worry about it, but it was hit by the Black Hawk II, actually. We had to go from the Bahamas to Florida in order to re-provision. The dinghy, that's help from Jay Kraft, another member, helped me get the last 13-foot AV inflatable, and it shipped down to me. Very thankful for that. That replaced the Turbo Sausage, by the way. Big up. Classic charts and charting stuff. All the books for the customers that wanted to come on down and learn. Another shot of the boat. Father and son coming and learning the ropes, literally. And then this, oh, this was cool. So Merrill asked me when we were sitting in the Bahamas, hey, I wonder if they have a GTY ski burgee here. And I said, yeah, I wonder. And then she said, why don't you look straight up? And I looked up and there it was. So does anyone know who put one in Staniel Key?
I'm guessing it was Ann and Denny Lautner, but that's just a guess.
Yeah? There was no name on it. So here's another example of how the boat just moves pretty nicely under head sail alone. I think at this day it was probably about 17 knots. So I could have run the main, but just being lazy and wasn't in a rush. And then after that trip to the Bahamas, we scooted on up and everyone got on out and I soloed from Annapolis up to upstate New York. And that was pretty cool. This was my birthday, actually. We had some good dates, some nice timing. Soloing up into New York. Phenomenal day. I was so pumped to check out the Statue of Liberty. That was the best shot I could get because the waves are so big from all the tour boats there. And then, Steve said that some people might have some questions about the Erie Canal. I don't know if anyone's done a presentation on the Erie Canal before, but it was a really cool thing to do. And when we took the mast down in Hoppanoose, I had to drive the bow of Wanda Rose into the mud in order to have this crane get enough reach to drop the mast. And then we became the fanciest, nicest pontoon boat the area's ever seen. And we went through all these locks, which are plenty wide enough. They're all 40 feet wide. Wanda Rose is 26 and a half, so we were all set. I dropped the mast on the port side so that we could clear the 15 and a half foot clearance that's required to go through the entire Erie Canal. If you're 21 feet, then you can go to what's called the Oswego Canal, which is well less than halfway, and then you shoot north and you're in Lake Ontario, which is also really cool, but my mom wanted to go antiquing and like checking out all these museums and stuff, and it was so worth it. It was totally awesome in the west side of the canal. Meryl did a great job handling the lines. It was a lot of boat for 2 people.
Her fingers look dirty.
Her hands look yellow. No, I highly advise wearing gloves for the entire process.
What's the displacement?
The boat is about 16 tons, I'd say. When fully loaded, that's with everything on it, Greg. 12 and a half empty. So that's what the advertisements will say, you know. And we hit a log in the Erie Canal, and I stuffed one of the rudders. And so I lost the steering because they're manifolded together. And here we are cruising along, and there's not too much current, but I was definitely going into shore. Fortunately, with the catamaran, you can work the 2 engines against one another, so you can, steer with just engine control. But it's really helpful to have rudder usage as well. With this, since it's hydraulic steering, I could just go bypass the hydraulics on one rudder, and so it was stuck in its stuck position, and then I could steer really freely with the other one. But I brought it on out, and this guy refused to bend it. He thought he was going to shatter the rudder, so I had to do a fix. That's rudder fix number 1. I ran aground all the time on this trip. I was the master of running aground 4 or 5 times.
What do you draw?
4.5 feet. Yeah.
In the Erie Canal?
Oh no, not on the Erie Canal. Turks and Caicos, the Bahamas, all these places, because it just looks so darn good, just a little bit closer. And then the tides get you. So a lot of it was gentle groundings, where hey, this is really nice, then you dry out. This was a cool shot of the canal. If you don't like this view, you're not going to like about 60-70% of the canal. It's a lot like this. And there's some cool graffiti. Some of it is excellent, really well done. And then some of it is just good old-fashioned lame. I don't know who would write that, but there was. And this picture might not look like much, but it is me on a boat going over a road. So I missed a car that had just gone underneath it, but a car was underneath the boat. So,
No
unusual.
airplanes close by?
What's that?
No airplanes close by?
No, that would have been a little trifecta. It's the dream. Pardon me. And so this is what it looked like on Predict Wind. We had our track so people could click on it. And I think it was pretty much my mom, Meryl's mom, and yeah, that's the list of people who checked on where we were. But you can see our route took us up into Chesapeake Bay, and then I cut through the Chesendale Canal, and then I went south out the Delaware, and up the New Jersey coast, cut on into New York City, and that's the length of the Hudson. Everything north of New York there, until you kick it on over to go west. And I guess over the L of the word Buffalo right there is approximately where the Oswego is. And it's a cool route as well, because that's what we took on our way out, as the boat is already out back in the Chesapeake Bay right now.
On the Jersey coast, did you go in at all, or just go from Jersey all the way up to New York?
I just skipped New Jersey.
Straight up?
Yeah. Yeah, Jersey's kind of shallow. The waters, not the people or any culture or anything like that. No, who might say? But yeah, it's just it's shallow. And when Sandy came through, it shifted everything around and stuff like that. And just being solo, I wanted to kind of cruise and get over it since I had a good weather window.
Yeah.
Had a shout out from a freighter captain here when we were just north of Detroit. And he's like, "Yeah, is your name Rourke Miller?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, my friend's Dennis, and we met one time all the time." "Yeah," and he was captain of this freighter. And he took a photo and then he sent us the shots. It's pretty cool. Unfortunately, I didn't have a spinnaker up or anything great like that. But like, hey, a little heads up and I'll fake it and throw some sail up. You know, that's me motor sailing, and that's, you know, Great Lakes cruising, isn't it? That could be our secret in this room. There's a lot of motoring I found. But, you know, there's the chute. We put it on up. Very easy. I can solo with the chute. It's a simple sail to put up on a catamaran because there's no pole that's necessary to hold it out to windward. You just go off of your windward hull. I mean, heck, the boat is 26.5 feet wide to begin with. So it's a very, very simple sail to operate on a cat. On a mono hull, putting a chute up by myself, I don't know that I do that. And I sailed Champion with all 5 sails up totally solo, and I wouldn't put a chute up on a mono hull in most conditions. Well, I did have crew. I'm sorry, I just didn't want to bother them. That last shot, that's Meryl and her mom, and her dog, who never took it to the boat. This dog held it for the entire length of Lake Erie. But we gave it a good shot. We gave her a good shot on board the boat. I was like, it's gonna pop. Hey, don't throw away your fender boards. You know, and when you're doing the canals, you want to have a couple of fenders that stick out, and then you take fender boards to protect your fenders. So your fenders protect the boats, and then the fender boards have nothing to protect them. I don't know, maybe you could sell fender board protectors, but anyhow, I didn't throw them away, and I'm glad I didn't, because we had to make a gantry for Meryl's aunt one night, or not a gantry, a gangway, sorry. Let's zip those together. So now we always haul lumber on here. Awesome sunset in, where was it? No, it's where your aunt came.
Oh, that was in Taos?
Taos. Yeah, really produced. Really sweet. Does anybody know where this is? Yeah, it's Mackinac. It's Mackinac, just not very crowded. We got there a little bit early.
Oh, yeah.
Mackinac, Detroit, Mackinac.
When was that? What month?
This would have been June 16th. And the enclosures you can see on Wanda Rose came in really handy. I was so cheap that I didn't want to destroy them when we were in the nasty weather of the South Atlantic, so I never put them down. And people begged me, but I am that cheap, I wouldn't do it. But I'm glad that we didn't, because they probably would have blown to smithereens, and they were really helpful in the Great Lakes. And I had some screens put in, and they're like, screens for what? I'm like, we're going to Michigan. Now this is actually later, so this is out of sequence, but that's that same exact slip at Mackinac Island, and it's a nice one. And there's Adelaide now, far from her first steps. Now she's cooking her first meal in the galley, which was Skyline chili from Cincinnati and Mackinac Island. Go figure. And after we left, we were so blessed with a light easterly in the straits, so I could put the chute up to go underneath the bridge in a little freighter. So this was a shot that was taken from the air show in Traverse City, because I don't have any shots, unfortunately, but I came into the club on the solstice. It was perfect. It was like we made it. And so I think that's June 19th? 21st? Okay. So we came on the solstice, and then this was a little ways after, and that's our spot over just south of Discovery Pier. Those were loud jets. Yeah, then we cruised on up to Lake Superior, which has been a huge dream of mine. I wanted to go see it all, and I just needed a boat that was fast enough. And, well, I had a boat that was fast enough, but it's impossible to see that whole lake. We spent 3 weeks up in Lake Superior, and just you can't see it all.
When were you up there? What month? July?
We went up there in July.
July.
Yeah, I was like, okay, we're taking the best slice of time, and we're going to go up and check out Lake Superior. Do you remember where this is? Grand Marais.
Oh, yeah.
And then Pictured Rocks were so deluxe. I couldn't believe it. Just totally glass, so calm. And I had never cruised up to Pictured Rocks. Been all over the Great Lakes and stuff, but I've never seen it, and you can't appreciate it from land. I just can't believe that's real. This was the last shot that the drone took. Rest in peace, drone. The drone came on in and landed, but not before me catching it and fumbling it, and it hit my arm. And you know those propellers that spin around really fast? Yeah, they go right through your shirt, no problem. And so I got thwacked, and blood's kind of spitting out everywhere. Not spitting out, just leaking real fast. And I'm sitting there like, I hope I got the shot. And I downloaded it, and then I was like, you know what? No, I bet I can get a better shot. And so I said, okay, I'm going to relaunch it. And I must have also injured the drone because the one turbine didn't spin fast enough, and so the thing went up and immediately down to Lake Superior. But its last command was go hard. And so when it was upside down, it just roomed away from me. It's yours if you get it. I feel bad. I don't like to litter, but 40 feet. This is the Ore Dock in Marquette. Has anyone cruised up there? It's so sweet.
The old ore dock?
I don't know. It doesn't look too new to me.
Is it downtown?
the old one.
Yeah.
That's the old one.
Yeah.
Seen it from shore.
It just looked like a neat picture. And this was just nice timing, cruising along. I didn't see this on my chart until I zoomed, one of those situations. And cool lighthouse with the sun setting over it. This is the tip of the Keweenaw Peninsula. Anybody been up there? Wow. Talk about awesome. It is so peaceful. Copper Harbor. People are cool. Everything's great up there. I flew the drone and I saw an eagle on a pine tree. And I kind of got in closer and closer and closer. And I was like, no, I'm just going to leave this thing be. The shot didn't look out there. But this is the itinerary for that portion. And then I've been to another rudder. And this is how they fix it when you're up in the UP. I got an idea how we can fix that. Maybe that last guy wouldn't fix the Erie Canal, but I have just the tool. It's a crane from the 40s, and we'll chain it to the front bumper and then lift it from the back. And it almost worked, but it didn't. And this was just something else. I'm a huge fan of the Grateful Dead. And we pulled into the Apostle Islands, and, oh, nuts. Well, there's no audio on here. A Grateful Dead cover band is jamming, and I couldn't get a good enough slip, so I dropped anchor in the middle of the harbor. And we were right there. It was totally perfect. I couldn't believe it. But I felt a little ostentatious. That was the problem. The Devil's Island up in the Apostles, has anyone been there before? Holy cow, I cannot wait to go back. So spooky and cool and surreal. You can actually take your kayaks and stuff into those caves, and most of them connect. And it goes around the whole island, so that was special. Wanda Rose is there on the left, and then my good friend from college, who one day when we were both sophomores, we both said, you know what? We stink at college. Let's go to maritime school. And so we left. And the two of us went down to Stewart, Florida, and we went to Chapman School of Seamanship. And I was 20, and he was 21. And we've been professional captains ever since. And he lives up there, and that's his boat. And there was one slip that we could pull into, and it was right next to him. And, I mean, it was the best. Best moment.
What's the other boat?
Oh, it is a... It starts with a V. I don't know, Greg. Sorry. He owns Cornucopia Sailing. That's my advertisement for him. Of course, I'm chart happy again. So charts upon charts upon charts. Gotta have them. That was the Lake Superior guidance we had. And then it was off to Isle Royale. So within 10 months, we had gone from around South Africa all the way up to an island I have dreamt of visiting forever in northern Lake Superior, and I was dog tired from sailing, and Meryl let me sleep through it, but she was listening to the wolves howl at night. So we'll have to go back. Moxie was on board. That's the dog that held it. That little skinny dog held it for Lake Erie. Oh, and then back to Adelaide. And this is just classic Sutton's Bay fun. You know, there we are back. That was our first dive. Recorded. Thought I'd share it. And then it was just the dad and the kid. We sailed from Traverse down to Chicago. A lot happened in between those two shots of Sleepmare Dunes in Chicago. Had to teach her Meryl's style of putting the sail away, which on a boat this big, there's no real other way to do it, except you climb on the top and then stuff it on down and zip it. She'll get better at it. That's the new owner's slip. Guy said, yeah, you can use my slip. Little did I know he was just schmoozing me because he was going to buy the boat. So Meryl and I have sold Wanda Rose, and we're under contract on the next one in South Africa because, hey, I'll do this trip again. This was great. And then back out, so that's the trip.
What boat are you buying now?
It's a St. Francis 50.
Same thing.
Yeah, I represent the brand. After we left and did the boat show, they asked Meryl and I if we'd be sales agents for the brand. And then we said, well, we'll get back to you. We'll think about it. We still want to sail it for a long time because I haven't been in boat sales before, but I've had a lot of opportunity to do it, and I fell in love with the boat. It's a phenomenal boat. The reason that I wanted it so badly initially is the designer of the boat built it in such a way that each of the keels is hollowed out and it is a holding tank. The reason he did it is so that if you ever run aground or strike a submerged object, you can only fill up that section as large as that tank is, right? But I said, wait a second, you've designed a catamaran that has two 80-gallon holding tanks? I'm going to the Great Lakes. To have 160 gallons of blackwater capacity is almost unheard of on a sailboat. So he had naturally designed it in, and that was one of the benefits. Yeah, so now we sell them, and we've done the Cape Town Boat Show, the Miami Boat Show, the Annapolis Spring Show, and the Annapolis Fall Show. The next show coming up is going to be the Miami Show 2020, and we'll have the next boat there. So, and we're outfitting it slightly, but we think we're going to just sell it right off the bat, and then we have a bunch of changes that we'd like to make to the next boat that we actually ultimately own and cruise. You learn a lot on the first one, don't you? You know? So. Does anybody have any questions? Greg?
So, Rourke, with
Yeah.
that big a beam and a cat, when you get any place where you need to pull up to a dock or something, you mentioned having two engines and apparently forward and reverse, no bow thrusters. Is it difficult to handle the boat in windy conditions when you need to be in a place like that?
Don't tell anybody, okay? Because I try to, like, you know, off my cap and dust my stripes and make myself look really good. It's so easy. The thing's 26 and a half feet wide and it has no windage at all, you know? It's just a total breeze to maneuver the boat. If it were harder, I guess I could have put in bow thrusters like a lot of people have, but there's no need for it at all. The hardest thing about docking a 26 and a half foot wide catamaran is getting a dock slip. You know, that's the toughest part about it.
You well to yourself.
You get a wall to yourself, but then you're on the wall, right? But no, maneuvering this thing is such a piece of cake. The other thing that's tricky on a cat sometimes is they've kind of gone like double-decker and party style on these things. So when you're up there, you have lost complete view of your sterns, right? And oftentimes you can't see like the opposite side bow. But from Wanda Rose, where her helm position is, it's a bulkhead steering. So I'm on the forward starboard side inside the cockpit, and I can see through a glass windshield the bows, and then I turn around and there I can see both sterns. It's helpful for docking, but I couldn't even imagine being in a man overboard situation where I couldn't see my corners, you know, if I'm backing down on someone or trying to get there. These, like a Lagoon 52 where you're on top and then you have no vision at all. I think the answer is probably in the future going to be like cameras and screens and stuff like that, but they're not there yet. They only have the problem, not the solution. Any other questions? Meryl? Any questions for Meryl? No.
Just in general, so your new owner is in Chicago, but the boat's in the Chesapeake?
Yeah.
So what are they going to do?
Well, okay, so the owner wanted to come on board and check it out, and he sailed with me for 3 weeks. And he is an executive with America's Cup, and he's number 3 in the world for the G32 carbon fiber catamarans. The guy knows more about sailing than I do by a whole lot, but he wanted to learn about cruising and learn the boat. And then at the end, he just said, you know, this is it. This is the boat that I would like to buy. And I said, well, there's a brand new one that they just built in South Africa. And he's like, yeah, but that one hasn't been across the ocean yet. You know, I'm taking my wife and my kid on this thing. You know, I know that this has already gone through the paces. So he actually bought more for the boat. In fact, I don't know anybody who's sailed for a year on a boat and then made money on it. And it's just because I've never heard of it happening. But it's at a big inconvenience. The big inconvenience is this. A boat that is built in another country has to be 3 years old before it's eligible for a waiver from the Jones Act. Meaning, I can't legally charter a boat in the United States except for Hawaii. And the territories are fair game, that's fine. But I can't legally charter one out unless it's 3 years old. So I was really eager to have this one get that old. And that was the real painful thing about selling it to the guy. But he eased the sting. Yeah. Yeah.
Carol, did you do any of the steering? Did you know how to sail before you picked up the boat?
Oh, I, not obviously at Rourke's level, although he's been a really good teacher, but I did. When we crossed, when we did the big crossing, we had 5, and we did a 4-person rotation on watch. And then the 5th person would get to float on their day off and be the galley wench, take care of everybody, but you didn't have to do any watch. So we were always on a 4-person rotation. And I think after like my first couple days on the boat, I just got thrown into the rotation, and I'm better learning. I'm a trial by fire person, so I was up for it. But until I got comfortable, I would just ask for my parameters before everybody went down. So what are my waking up the crew parameters? And as long as I could stay within those, I was fine to take watch at night and everything. I didn't enjoy freezing my butt off until we got into warmer waters, which was not till Brazil. But I wore everything I had on board in multiple layers, like honestly, like 6 layers. And these boots that I picked up in South Africa that are sheepskin, but they're so warm, and I just loaded up on all my clothes and then slowly peeled off layers as we got closer to Brazil, but I did, yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, knowing the parameters is a key thing for everybody on these cats, because you got to sail by the numbers. You're not going to feel the boat if it's blowing 16 knots versus 35 knots. You just can't. There's no heel that's going to let your, all the experienced sailors in here know that there's a lot of breeze picking up. It's when you look down and you look at the Windex and you say, "Holy smokes, it's blowing out there." So they call it sailing by the numbers.
Are there any other questions for Carol?
Hey, thanks so much for having me.